Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Thursday. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Hey Deb, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I know we had to take a little technical break last week. We had some issues, but we have got those resolved and we're happy to be back this week. And I'm excited to talk about the topic of ERGs, or employee resource groups, or sometimes you may hear them called BRGs, business resource groups, but essentially groups within an organization that represent underrepresented groups and help move things along for that group and get things done. They are very common, especially now in many organizations, and they are often great resources for the people involved, and they do move the agendas along that help the company get better. But there also are some challenges that come along with having ERGs within your organization and making sure that they are successful. So I know it's a topic that's near and dear to your heart, and I'm going to start by asking you a question. How do you know, like if you have ERGs within the organization, how do you know if they're effective and if they're really additive to the organization?
Well, that's a great question, Deb. And I get asked that quite a bit. The first step for anything, ERG, whatever you want, to your point, whatever you want to call it, anything that you're going to do that's going to affect your corporate culture needs to be observable and measurable. And so there are different reasons why you might need ERGs or feel like you want to have them in your culture. And so it might be the lack of certain groups across the culture into leadership roles, or it might be, they're there, but they're not represented in the right way. Or the teams just don't know how to work together, don't have support. Whatever those reasons are, you need to talk to your employees to get a very clear baseline of what they need to feel like they belong, because everyone should feel like they belong. And then once you've established that baseline, you can then decide which activities, what are you going to change, and then create key KPIs to observe and measure the effort. Is the effort producing the desired outcome? And do that regularly throughout the year so that you know that you're on target. As with any roadmap or strategy, it has to be nimble, right? And so what you thought worked might not work. And so you have to be able to change that. And then, it leads into what I think we're going to talk about a little later, in making sure that anyone who is giving up their time for an ERG or BRG feels like they're getting something from it. And so you can see where your efforts are affecting change with the organization.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I think metrics are really key, and getting the employee input and then being able to constantly sort of continuously improve. So if you're always asking and then kind of tweaking as you go, hopefully you're moving forward. But it's okay. So let's say we have established some employee resource groups. We've talked to the members, perhaps. We've gotten input from the employees. We've set up some measurable opportunities to measure and times to measure and get feedback. But let's say, all of these groups, I do believe groups need leadership, right? So every group should have a leader, somebody to kind of help guide the whole group, even if they're working together as a team. Mm-hmm. And what I found in talking and also experiencing this myself is oftentimes within an ERG group, they will tap a leader who is a member of that group. Oftentimes it's a woman, not always, but oftentimes it is. And that person is given that role in addition to the job that they're already doing. And that can be a challenge because these ERGs take work. It's like anything else in life, like a relationship. Like, it takes constant work. It's not a full-time job, but it has to be tended to. So how does somebody manage, and what are the challenges when somebody's given a stretch assignment to oversee one of these ERGs?
So first thing, it's never really a stretch assignment, because a stretch assignment is something that gives you added exposure for a promotion, right? Or consideration for another position. Working in an ERG is, unless you work for a diversity, equity, and inclusion company, is not going to set you up for a promotion unless your desire is to be the next DEI officer, right? So I think that companies need to be honest when they are offering these positions to employees, that it's not a stretch assignment. It's an added responsibility. And to your point, while there are men and women are on ERGs, generally women are the ones who are offered more frequently or take on these added responsibilities that are never going to get them seen as more of a whatever that needs to be for a business promotion. So I think that that's the first thing. Companies need to be honest. Secondly, as the employee, we also need to be realistic. If you are passionate about something, that's great. Then here's an opportunity, if this is something you're passionate about, to be a part of that change. But be realistic. Understand, if you're in a role and you have a lot to do, then understand what you're going to have to delegate, right? How are you going to have to manage it with what responsibilities you might have outside of the office? And communicate that up front so that no one is disappointed when there's a meeting and you can't be there, right? Or for whatever that is. Just, it's about communication. And then the third part of that is just the burnout. Understand what the burnout can be if you don't do those things up front, right? Burnout can come in different ways. If you are a part of the underrepresented group, your challenge is already there, right? Because we know, unfortunately, in many corporate settings, many corporate settings, that if you are of an underrepresented group, no matter what your title is, you have to prove yourself on a regular basis, which means that your day job is almost 2 times what your colleagues might be. So don't burn yourself out on volunteering when you know your focus needs to be on there. And again, it goes back to being honest. The other side of the burnout is, let's just say you're in a company and the employees decided they want an ERG. It didn't come from leadership. And you've had to petition to get this ERG. And you don't really know. You don't know, right? You just know you want to do something, but you don't know what that is. You don't know to do a baseline. And so you're spinning your wheels, but nothing's really happening. And so that kind of burnout will just affect the company in a very negative way. It'll affect you in a negative way. And you'll say, hands up, that this doesn't work. So there are ways for you to control part of it. And then there are ways for the company to control the other part of it, and being realistic about what the ask is. And look, don't be afraid. Bring in a professional. You could bring in one professional consultant who could really help you move the needle very far, quickly, without that burden on your employees. So that's my answer. It's a long answer, but that's my answer.
But it makes me think of a couple of things which are kind of related. And the first is that sometimes I think what can happen, especially if an organization does not have a lot of minority in leadership. So let's say that they have somebody at an SVP level who is a Black person, as an example, and that person gets used for every single thing that's related to diversity and inclusion. So they're not just leading an ERG, but they're like giving input on this, or you may have experienced that yourself. I think it's incumbent that the organization understand that, to your point, bring in an expert to support this person, because they do have a day job to do, and they can't be expected to give input for every single thing that the company wants to do. So that's my first.
That's a good point. Let's just stop there. So I have friends who that has actually happened to. SVP, highly functioning, highly successful contributor to companies. And then when, the company decided they wanted to do more in that ERG space and kind of realized, oh, we should be doing something, they tapped her, right? And then they tapped a few junior associates. The burden became so much that they then said, well, do you want to, well, I think you have to choose. Now, this person has a financial background, right? So she's in finance doing, like, she has multiple degrees, like, amazing woman. So now here's your boss that you're working for, and you've been contributing millions of dollars to their bottom line. And they're saying, well, we're seeing you slip over here in your day job. By the way, they're both your day job, right? That becomes your night job. Now let's decide. You have to choose. You either continue, like, we just don't see, because, you weren't able to handle both things. Maybe you're not on the path to this leadership role that we thought you could do, because you couldn't handle both of these things. So are you interested in being the DEI lead? Well, no. If I wanted to be the DEI lead, then I would have gone to, but why would I have to make that choice? And so I'm talking to the corporations. Like, you have to understand that what it takes to be that person of color, or that person of anything that's not the majority in these leadership roles, it takes a lot because of those biases and those second guesses. And so when you give them that extra responsibility, you have to be realistic and see it. It's not a stretch assignment, and you shouldn't have to make a choice about your career about a volunteer opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that leads me to my last question, which is, what about situations where organizations want to put ERGs into place, and they want them to be led by somebody at a senior level who can help get decisions made and help things move along, which is critical for these groups. But let's say that the group is not represented at the senior level of the organization. So is it okay to have somebody lead an ERG who's not part of that specific ERG group? Like, can that be successful? Because I think it happens. So the question is, can it be done well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If the person is honestly and authentically committed to it, then it absolutely. Oftentimes, it's actually even more effective, because if you are a person who has you have the power, you have privilege, you have the ear of senior leadership, and the respect of your colleagues, then that's really what's most important. People will follow you. They will want to hear what you have to say. And if it's not about being of that group. And that's the other thing I talk about. Like, you don't have to be of that group to care about having an inclusive community, or having a culture, a professional culture where people feel like they belong. I want to give a quick example, and I hope he doesn't mind. But I have a mentor, and he is the CEO of a huge company. I won't use his name, so he probably won't mind, but he'll know I'm talking about him. And he is a white male, right? He's the CEO, huge company. He was a business leader, right? I think maybe C-suite, but business leader. And there was an opportunity for him to take on an initiative for women. There was an opportunity out there for women. It didn't come to him. But he thought, wow, so I'm a leader. I haven't really even thought about what it means for women in this workplace. I'm going to take on this initiative. And so as a result of taking on that initiative and seeing how women were underrepresented, it led him to then look deeper into other groups that might have been underrepresented. And so he took on, African American and other underrepresented groups. So then he became the CEO, because he was very, very successful as a business person, but he was a business person who cared about the culture. And so he has built this incredible culture with ERGs and different councils to make sure that they're holding everyone accountable, right? But here's a white guy who took on women's issues, took on issues of underrepresented ethnic groups, and has changed the culture of this company that's a multi-billion-dollar company that's been around forever. So it is possible and it is important. And so to answer your question in a very wordy way, yes.
Great. Well,
Yes.
that's great. That's a wonderful example, and it's good to know because I think people get put. You should go because you want to be there, and you should lead it because it means that it will be better for everyone. And it shouldn't, to your point, it shouldn't matter as long as you have the ability to help move it along and get things done. I think that's important for people to know. So I guess my next question and my last question: what's the bottom line here today, Kimberly?
So the bottom line, Deb, is that everyone should feel like they belong and everyone should be a part of progress in a company. Now, does that happen naturally? Not necessarily. So if you are in this situation as the leader, be curious and care enough that you're bringing groups together to help your employees, but you're not adding burden to those employees who are willing to be a part of that progress. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There are consultants and companies out there. And when you think of what the ROI could be in your culture, the investment is small. So reach out. We're out here to help you move forward and to make sure that you have a culture that is welcoming and inclusive.
That is great. Well, thank you. I think that was a great discussion. I love this topic, and hopefully people get some ideas from it. And next week, I'm so excited. You had a great topic for us. We're going to talk about Juneteenth and how far we've come from June 19th of 2020 to June 19th of 2021.
I can't wait to talk about that because I know June 18th of 2020, people didn't even know what Juneteenth meant. And now it's going to be a national holiday. So that's going to be a fantastic conversation next week. So we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us, and be safe and enjoy Juneteenth. I'd love to hear for next week. I'd love to hear how different companies supported Juneteenth. So when you're listening to this, please respond on Monday. Yeah. Send me notes, send Deb notes, let us know, because we're going to include that in our conversation next week. So have a wonderful weekend. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Pride Month.